Excited to be here today with Women Who Code. I love this organization and I love being able to contribute to it. I am a front-end developer by trade. I studied computer science in college and have built a lot of front-end applications since then. And I'm definitely more of a visual learner, so that's kind of why I've stuck to the front end, but that doesn't mean I don't value the back end. I just prefer doing integrations with it. So actually today we're going to be doing an integration with Twilio. So at the same time, while you're signing up for a Wix account, if you also already have a Twilio trial, it might be a good idea to do that because we will need it a little bit later on if you are participating in the interactive part. But I like letting other people do like the heavy lifting and more complex stuff. So I love showing off integrations, and we're definitely going to do one today, which I'm super excited about. I am also fairly active on Twitter. I love tweeting about random things. So if you want to chat with me on Twitter, if you have any questions about the presentation today, or you kind of want these links that we're going to share if you're watching the recording later on, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and I will be happy to chat with you. And last but not least, I am a developer advocate for Corvid by Wix. And really excited to show you how powerful of a web platform Corvid is for your Wix site and show you all the amazing features, or I guess just a subset. We don't have enough time to do all the features. So what are we going to be doing today? We're going to be helping Katherine Johnson fill out her portfolio to showcase all of the amazing work that she has contributed to NASA over the years. We're going to be using Corvid to do this, to enable our site to be really robust and dynamic in only the 35 minutes that we have here today. So I can show you how fast it is to build these super sites for the super women like yourself out there in the world today. So hopefully you can take this and use it to also build your own website. If you're building a digital portfolio, if you're looking for a new opportunity, or maybe you have a friend who just needs an e-commerce site, you can see how fast it is to create a production-ready application, especially if they've been impacted by, their business has been impacted by the virus. We want to showcase how awesome and how powerful Corvid can be in getting your business online, getting your personality online, and building out any sort of website that you may need for any sort of activity that you're trying to do. If you want to follow along, because as I mentioned, we are going to have a couple exercises. This URL is, I pasted it in the chat already, but this is going to be the short URL to get to the Wix editor, to get the template that we'll be building with. The exercises are built into the template. So when I get to like exercise number 1, just go find exercise number 1 in the code. I'll show you because I'll be doing it with you as we go through it. But if you want to be part of the interaction of this talk today, please feel free to copy this link and check it out. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Corvid because probably you're not familiar with it, which is totally fine. If you are familiar with Wix, you know it as a drag and drop UI editor where you can build really professional UIs without writing any code and build these really robust websites. But we as developers like more control, right? Like we want to be able to touch the code, we want to be able to add dynamic components wherever we want to add them. We don't want to be constrained by just a drag and drop interface. And that's how Corvid was invented. It is a completely JavaScript-based web development platform on top of Wix. So if you've already learned JavaScript in your school, boot camp, job, wherever you're learning your coding skills, you can utilize it on Corvid, which means you don't have to learn a whole new language, a whole new technology stack or platform. You can utilize the skills that you've already learned through your education or career opportunities and build really powerful websites really fast. It does have a built-in IDE, so all of your code is coupled to your pages, which makes it really nice for code maintenance purposes. Instead of trying to figure out kind of where the code is sitting and how it's displaying on the UIs, we have that IDE to help you keep track of your code maintenance and figure out where the logic is for your different pages. As well as we have access to an integrated database, which means no setting up of tunneling to the database, no additional hosting that you have to worry about. You get all of this stuff right out of the box with Corvid. It is also sitting on top of an entirely serverless Node.js server. So that means you get access to all your favorite components of Node.js, like NPM modules, and utilizing creating and exposing HTTP functions. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second too. But you can bring all of your favorite tools with you in a totally JavaScript Node.js environment. And the number one thing that I love the most is it is a zero setup to production grade applications. That means I'm not setting up my host servers anywhere. I don't have to go find a domain server and connect it to my website. We can do all of that from one platform, and you can have a website up and running in absolutely no time. I personally have been part of deployment calls that have gone 4 hours long in the middle of the night, and it is not fun. So being able to do a deployment on the spot in real time with little to zero downtime and never having to worry about spinning up a new environment is a really powerful tool in my opinion. So if you haven't seen Wix before, I just want to take 2 seconds to show you kind of what that looks like. It is a drag and drop UI editor, as I mentioned, that is pretty powerful just out of the box. So here we can see we're dragging and dropping UI elements. We're positioning them on the page. So if you are working maybe in an agency or a company and you have designers on your team, your designers can live in this space and have a lot of control and flexibility over the images as they're building them out. So there is a lot of power behind this UI editor, just even out of the box, like adding parallax effects and scroll effects as you're moving through the page. So there is already a lot of power with Wix. But we're here to talk about Corvid and all the tool sets that Corvid can enable for you on top of Wix. So as I mentioned, we have that built-in IDE that corresponds with the pages that you're building on. You also get access to the back end of your website now too, so you can expose more complex functionality and do the heavy lifting of your site not on your UI, which is super important when you're building sites for the web, because speed is everything, and the more you're doing on the client, the UI side, the slower your page is going to be, which is not good. It is that Node.js server, so again, you get all your favorite NPM packages that you can bring along with you. You can create and expose HTTP functions. You can also consume any REST APIs that are available out there. You get access to a full suite of front-end APIs, because since we like a lot of the UI elements from Wix are very black boxy, and the reason they are that way is because it's important for sites to be responsive on screen size. Like I'm right now looking at this on my laptop, but I have a big monitor and I want to make sure that my site looks good on both. I have a mobile device, maybe I have a tablet too. Maybe my site needs to be available in a couple different countries. I need to consider accessibility concerns, because otherwise there is a financial implication associated with that. And so the reason we don't give you full access to the UI components is because we don't want you to lose all of those benefits of using a tool like Wix, but we want to enable you to add more dynamic complexity to your site. So we do expose APIs, and we're going to talk about them a lot today, to be able to manipulate the elements on the screen. You'll get access to different properties and functions, and we'll talk a little bit about that too in more detail a little bit later. You also get access to those external databases, as I mentioned, marketing tools and integrations. So again, if you have to bring your business online, it's important to be able to do marketing, customer management, and we're going to give you a lot of access to those tools too. And then another really powerful thing that we're going to talk about today is dynamic pages. So a lot of the times with static sites, you have to rebuild a page multiple times, even if it's going to look more or less the exact same. So think of this as a catalog in a store where you have more or less the same page displaying all of the information about a product, but depending on the product, you need it to be slightly different. Utilizing dynamic pages is going to reduce your code overhead. So you create one page one time and you embed the dynamic logic that you need based off of flags or data points in your database. And you code it one time, it's one page, it's easy to manage, but it'll look different for every item in your database to make sure that it is adapting to the needs of the product. So this to me is a super powerful tool that we're going to dig into a little bit later as well. So this is an entirely fully managed site for you. So as I mentioned, we have the app layer with the visual builder that also has data binding, which we'll talk about a little bit later too, to create those dynamic driven pages. We've got our storage layer, which is going to be our database layer. You're going to get access to all of your CRUD functions, as well as be able to do some aggregate on your data and some database hooks. And then finally, we have our compute layer as well, which is going to be our Node.js, get access to those HTTP functions, schedule jobs, and do some secrets manager, have a secrets manager, and do some monitoring as well to make sure your site is healthy. I noticed that I got a message about some questions, so I'm going to pause here and take a look at those questions. Oh, the link doesn't work. Okay. Okay, I do have the long link as well. So let me. Is the link not working for everybody? Because I can make sure I get the long link there. Maybe, I don't know. If that short link isn't working for you, I'm going to paste the long link in the chat here. Oops. Did that paste? Okay. Oh, sorry, guys. I'm struggling with technology today. There's that long link if that short link is not working for you. Can someone test that one out and make sure that one's working as well? Awesome. Okay, cool. We will need that soon. So thank you for guys for letting me know. Awesome. So let's get back into the presentation. I don't love Google Slides, so I apologize for these long wait times. So we do want to start talking about some of the Corvid basics. So let's go, we're going to dive into like what it looks like to manipulate the editor. How do you even get to these different components? Because if you click that long link, you'll notice you don't have an IDE that I mentioned. You don't have a database that I just mentioned. So we're going to dive into how we get all of those things too with the Corvid basics. We're going to go ahead and look at some data and dynamic pages. We have a Twilio integration, which I'm really excited about. And then if we have time, we'll also look at the timeline API for creating animations from Wix. So our Corvid basics, we're going to look at how to turn dev mode on, so how do you get all of those tools. We're going to look at the element selector API, which is going to enable you to add dynamic abilities to your elements already on your UI. We're going to look at element events, and then just a quick link to the API reference. So to turn dev mode on, it's really simple. If you're in the editor right now or you've used it before, if you look in that top menu bar, you'll notice that there is actually a page that says, or a menu item that says dev mode on. If you click that, you'll have a button to turn on dev mode. Once you click that button, you're actually going to see that your page is going to change a little bit, and you'll get access to your site structure and also a code editor on the bottom. If you start playing around with some of the UI components that you can add, you'll notice that you now have access to different input fields as well. So if you want to create custom forms, dev mode is going to help you with that as well. So let's go ahead and look at the element selector. So the element selector is this funky little $W API in which you can pass in the parameter of the ID of the field in order to manipulate it. And so you can use this to access the different elements on your UI page and manipulate them, or look at them, get their values, add events to them, run events on top of them. So one of the main uses for this is actually for getting and setting values as well. So we can use the element selector API to grab like text inputs or text fields, text values, and then update them as well, which is what we're going to be doing in our first exercise. So we're going to look at exercise number 1 now, where we're going to actually set the value of the page title text. So I know some of you that short link isn't working, so the long link is in the chat if you want to go ahead and grab that. Or if you're watching this later, I can go also share that as well. So when you click on that and it pops up your editor, I'm going to use a different one just because I also have my like Twilio information in there and I don't want to share that publicly. So it's going to look just like this. So we've already got a page nicely stubbed out for us. We're going to just fill it in with some additional information. This is our Superwomen site, but we want it to be about Katherine Johnson. So we're going to actually update that text. So if I go to dev mode and turn dev mode on, it's going to pop up that site structure, and it's also going to pop up your code as well here at the bottom. So we do have page code and site code. Page code is for your page. So it's everything that you want interaction-wise on this individual page, so this portfolio page that we're looking at here, versus site code is everything we want to be functional site-wide. So no matter what page I'm on, if I want that functionality on every single page, I'm going to put it in my site code. If I want it just on this singular page, I'm going to put it in my page code. So our exercise number 1, I'm going to go ahead and hide this so I can see, is right here. Right after our page is ready, we are going to update the value of page title text. And so one of the things to notice here is with the IDs, out of the box, they come like text2 or box2, which can be really complicated to keep track of for your code maintenance. So you want to make sure you give it a descriptive title. So in this case, this is my website's title text, or my page's title text. So I want to update it on this page to be the title of the person that I'm showcasing. So in this case, it's Katherine Johnson. So we want to go ahead and update our blank here to set the value of title text. So I gave you a little hint here. We are going to look at the title text element on the screen, and you should be able to start auto seeing some properties. So if anyone thinks they have the solution for exercise number 1, go ahead and pop that in the chat. And I'm going to switch over there. Thank you, guys. Does anyone think they have a solution? Yes. Is it Cindy? Cindy, you are correct. So if we go ahead and update our blank here, what we want to do is we want to $W select using the pound or hashtag, however you look at it, title text, and this will select the element of the text. But that has a bunch of different properties that we can see when we start auto-completing here. And one of them is going to be that text property, and we want to update that value to Catherine Johnson. If you want to test that you got this right, we have this fancy little preview button, and you can think of this essentially as like your QA environment. So if I, right now it says Superwomen, so if I click preview, it should say Catherine Johnson instead, and that's how I know I did it right. So I'm gonna go ahead and ignore all those errors there because this is a template with some questions in it, so there is some broken code. So just go ahead and ignore all of those errors. But you should be seeing Catherine Johnson in your title text here, and that's how you know that you were successful in updating the text. Awesome. Okay. So beyond being able to do getters and setters with the properties, I don't want to present because it takes so long to load. You also have events on these as well. And so the fun thing is a lot of the times the only things that are interactive on pages are going to be buttons or links. And that's sometimes not sufficient for us. And we need it to be more interactive beyond that. So we have events that are available as well. All right. Google Slides does not like me today, so we're just going to use that a little bit less. So one of the ways to look at this is if I look at like this text property or text element again, I can actually see my list of events that are available for this element. And a lot of elements will have this whole list. So this enables you to add a lot of dynamic capabilities to a bunch of different UI elements on your screen. Viewport enter and leave are really handy for creating sticky headers. Mouse in and out are great if you need to create something that is going to flip based off of a user's interactions. On click is going to allow you to add more dynamic abilities to your components. So in this example, I have title text. I already have a click and event set up here. And if I click it, it'll actually take me to that function. And what we can see here is I'm using a new API called Wix Location, which I'm going to import from the Wix Location API. So this is how we import that API, because again, we don't want everything with us all the time. So we choose which APIs to bring with us, because the more you bringing with you on your UI, the more expensive it is, and the slower your site is going to be, which is not good for SEO and also end user experience. So the Wix Location API enables me to get access to the site navigation. So in this case, I can use it to navigate to my homepage. So if I ever am off my page and I need to get home, I can just click on the title text and it is now my home link. So this is handy when you're building deeper and more complex sites. If you need, if you don't have like an image or a logo or a button, if you want to use text, you can utilize the on-click event on top of text to create that landing page back to home all the time. So that is, I'm just going to use this because it's not loading very nicely for me. So that is our events. Whee. I apologize that Google Slides is being difficult today. So there is also an API reference. So if you want to take a look at that in more detail, so See, this is why I don't love Google Slides. You can go to wix.com/Corvid/reference, and that'll take you to the more detailed API reference guide for everything that's available from Wix. So we've started talking about the editor elements API, but you can see that there's a bunch of other ones for like locations, CRM. There we go. You can get access to, if you have a store set up there, we have APIs for that. We have database APIs as well. So you can see there's a whole list of APIs that are available here, and we're only touching the surface of what is available through Corvid. So let me also go ahead and share that reference guide too. So if you want to take a look at the reference. So question, why doesn't it automatically change the code without pressing preview? So you need to publish it. So this is essentially like you're saving it to the editor, and you can automatically set up saves, but sometimes you don't want to actually publish that code just yet. So you do need to actively choose to publish your changes, but you are auto saving as well. So publishing does automatically, or like previewing it does automatically save your code changes as well. All right, I want to also talk a little bit about data. So let's see if this loads. So when you open up Corvid, you also get access to a database too. So this is a MongoDB that is powering your site. It's going to look relational from the front end perspective, but it is a MongoDB. You get a lot of standard features of a database that you would expect out of the box. Google Slides and I are best friends today. There we go. So it is an integrated database where you have kind of your standard text, number, Boolean, date, time fields as well as some more complex fields. So you can already start introducing data validation to your database when you're using our Wix database because it gives you additional fields like images, addresses, documents, URLs, audios, rich text, references. And so it can give it a relational feel and start doing data validation without actually implementing any of this. So it's a really handy tool to actually start incorporating a database into your site and start doing data-driven sites. Once you have a database collection on your site, you can actually start doing dynamic pages and also binding your data to your screen. So when you connect your database to your UI elements on the page, what it does is it creates a data set. And a data set is an object of the database, which is a smaller subset of all of the data. So think of this as like you don't want to bring your whole database with you. You just want a small chunk of it. And you also maybe need this to be read-only or write-only. So you also get a new layer of control of permissions for your database at this level too. And this data set is a filtered data set that you can limit the size to. So if I only want 5 objects on my page, then I can limit this data set to 5, even if my database is 100. So this is going to be helpful for making sure that you're not lugging all of this data on your UI, because that's a very expensive choice to make. And again, when it comes to sites, we want them to be lean, so they're fast. So using data sets is going to enable you to create a leaner experience on your page. So we're going to see how this works in exercise number 2, where we're going to create a new database collection and connect it to a superpowers repeater on our portfolio page. So back in our Wix editor, I want to create a new database by going to database and plus add new collection. And what this does is it brings up a content collection page. And so you can just name it. I'm going to name it superpowers. And I'm going to turn this off because we don't need to create a dynamic page for this because it's just a list of powers. And so make sure you turn that off. And we're going to go ahead and create our collection. And this will actually create the database for us as well. And so when it creates a database, we want to make sure it has 2 fields. You might already have these pre-filled in, which is fine. I created a list of what I think Katherine Johnson's superpowers are, but feel free to add to that list as well. And I also gave them a score because she's awesome at a lot of things, but I wanted to show that the data can be different as well. So we are loading. So you should have a title and score field if you did name it superpowers, because that'll find the matching database that was already there behind it. And we have got a list of skills and their rankings out of 5. So feel free to add additional ones here if you want to, or you can use that as is. And then when we go back to our portfolio page code, if we look for exercise number 2, we'll find our superpowers repeater, which is another element from Wix, which is essentially a more visual representation of a table. So we don't always want to show data as just like a table when we have multiple rows or multiple items to display. So we can use these items called a repeater, which you can connect to a database. So in this case, like you connect it to data, and that creates a data set. So again, that's that smaller object of data, not your whole database. And you can connect all the visual fields to those columns in your database, and it'll create a visual element for each row in your database. So in this case, we're going to update our superpowers repeater, which is going to be connected to our superpowers data set that we have on the page, which is connected to that superpowers collection. So a repeater connects to a data set, which connects to a collection. And we have this function called onItemReady for repeaters. And so what this says is when I've loaded my data set and my data is ready to be used, I can actually iterate through my data and manipulate each individual UI element for that data row that we're trying to display. So in this case, we're looking at item. So this is kind of a different and more effective implementation of a for loop for your items in your repeater. So instead of saying for I in your data set, you're going to just use this items because that's essentially going to do that for you. And then you can access the different UI elements in that repeater element to update the value of it with the data in that row that you're currently looking at. So think of $item as like your data set index I. And so here we want to actually update this to show the values of the items in our database. So we can access the row that we're currently looking at using the item data, as I mentioned here in the hint. And then we want to populate these with different fields that are coming in from our database. So we have 2 fields, remember, title and score. So we want to update maybe the text to be the title and the value to be the score of the slider. So anyone have any guesses on how to do that? Exactly, Amy, that is correct, yes. So, oops, wrong one. So I'm going to go item data.title, item data.score. And when I go ahead and preview, I'm able to actually see all of those data points that are in my database on my page as well. Yeah, I guess also to clarify the earlier question about like why we have to go to the preview editor. So we don't actually execute the code in this IDE here because that would be a really intensive execution and it would slow down your experience as a developer. So as you can see up here, this one is actually automatically updated to match my database, my solutions database, because I'm using the pre-built data binding that we have. And so there's no code execution that it needs to run. Code execution only happens when we actually go to that preview mode, similar to like if you were trying to build a site and you didn't run your application, your code wouldn't actually execute. So in order to execute the code, we do have to go to that preview mode. Awesome. And so that's how we add data and like dynamically create data on our pages and dynamically show different information on our pages. So now we're going to move into our Twilio integration. I'm not going to try to present the slides again because it's just causing problems. So if you don't already have a Twilio account, you are going to need to get a Twilio verified phone number. So you do need to sign up for an account. You can create a free phone number out of the box as well. Or you can pay to create one that is more specific to whatever area code you're looking for. So I just have a free one. You also are going to need that auth token and SID to verify that you are allowed to be accessing the Twilio NPM module and creating a client to send messages. So if you haven't already done so and you want to follow along, please go ahead and try to do that now while I'm talking through kind of what the next steps are here. This also means that we're ready to actually get into the back end of our code as well and utilize NPM modules. So when you enable Corvid on your Wix site, you actually get access to your back end side of your code, which you're able to expose JavaScript web modules, which can then be imported on your front end. You get access to all of your favorite NPM modules, and you also get access to a new API called Wix Fetch, where Wix Fetch is Wix's implementation of the Fetch NPM module, which will enable you to access any third-party API. So if they don't have an NPM module, or maybe you built an HTTP function and you need to connect to it on a different site that you're building, you can utilize Wix Fetch to actually get and post data, kind of the standard REST API verbs that you would expect. So Fetch is a great tool if you need to get data that doesn't have an NPM module, but it has a third-party API that's available and exposing their data. In this case, Twilio does have an NPM module, so we're just going to utilize that. So if I look at the back end of my code, so we've been looking at the UI side over here, and now if I go to my backend side, I have a Twilio JavaScript module. In here, I have stubbed out how we're going to actually work with the Twilio Node NPM module. So if you look at your Node modules, you should see that Twilio is already installed there. If it's not already installed, it's super easy to add NPM modules. We just go to install new module on the Node modules, and we can go ahead and install Twilio if it's not already there. So super easy to add NPM modules. Then we just access it by importing it in our backend function. I'm going to create an exported send SMS function that's going to take in a message body. So we're going to be passing in that value. We're going to create a new Twilio client using our account SID and auth token to make sure that we're verifying us as users are allowed to be doing this. And we can then use that client to use their messages create method. So Twilio has really great API documentation if you want to dig into everything that you can do with Twilio. We're just going to stick with sending an SMS, so we're going to use the messages create. We've got a message body, a text me number, and my Twilio number. So that my Twilio number is that number that you're creating in Twilio as like the verified sender from Twilio. And then text me number, I'm going to use my personal phone number for that, so I can show you guys that message. Once you create the backend code, since we've exported it, we can actually import that the backend function into our front end code using the standard import method that we've been using before. So we can import the function name from the backend module. So go ahead, we want to make sure that we update those names to make sure they match, but think of this as like traversing your file structure. So that's where we're going to take us to exercise number 3, which will be our final exercise, where we're actually going to build that Twilio integration. So in the back end, we need to add our SID and auth token, and then our Twilio number and our personal number, or whatever number you want to be utilizing. And then on the front end, we're going to actually import and call this function. So just for my personal credentials safety, I have created a additional content file, content JavaScript module to protect my data. So you guys can't see that because otherwise, if I expose this, you never want this on the front end, right? Because if you expose this on the front end, anyone can get access to that and maliciously pretend to be you. So I've created a JavaScript module where I export these values just for my own personal protection here. So you want to go ahead and grab those values from this isn't meant to be a challenge, this is just meant to be your personal information so you can send your text messages. So go ahead and grab those values. I'm going to be using that phone number that I've already set up on Twilio, as I mentioned, and then my own personal phone number. And then once I have this all set up on the back end, I can switch over to my portfolio. And on that, I'm going to switch over to my site code because where this actually lives is going to be in the footer here. So I'm going to request super help. And when I request super help, it's going to send me a text message being like, hey, I need you. So if I go back over to my site code, it's a stubbed out text me button click event. So that's going to be on this form submit button down here, which is going to grab the input values with those getters and setters that I mentioned earlier. So the first thing I need to do is import my function. And just for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and do this with you guys. And then I can actually call that function on my text button click event. So I can say send SMS. Oops, it'd be helpful if I could type. But if you do recall, this does take in a parameter of the message body. So I have constructed a text string here that we can just pass in. And so once we go ahead and preview that, I can actually send myself a text message. And I should be getting a text message from Twilio. So you should be actually getting that text message as well. So it's super simple to add an integration like that. I want to show you guys saw that. Yeah. So let me go to Mars. Cool. And that's how easy it is to like add an integration like Twilio to your application and have that complex backend functionality with little code using your favorite NPM modules that already exist out there and incorporate them into your UI. Yep. All right, and we do have, if you want to, you guys have access to the code now, so you can also see that there is a Wix animation API, which enables you to add timelines and add dynamic abilities to different UI elements on your screen. So feel free to poke around in that code and see some more of the things that you can do. Afterwards, you can publish your application and you'll actually have an up and running website. So when I go and hit publish, I'm going to actually get a URL for my site and be able to go and visit that site. And that is not a QA environment. This is now a production environment as well. So you have your site already up and running and you can access different information, dig into the way we work with different repeaters, where we can actually play around with the timeline API and dynamically hide the information on this page as well. So if we look at some of the different solutions that Katherine Johnson had worked on when she was at NASA, we can see different things that she's done and different topics that she's tackled. So again, you have access to this code, so feel free to dig around and play around with it and reach out to me to ask any more questions. And you have a running application. And then, yeah, you're ready to go. So sorry we ran out of time here. I wanted to make sure I got you guys to play along with me. So hopefully this was helpful in seeing everything that you can do with Corvid. Again, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Meredith Hassett. You can find me on Twitter at MLHassett. And I look forward to seeing what you guys build with Corvid. I'll also be available for questions, I think, now too. So. Thank you, guys. So yeah, I guess leave that back up. I guess let's stop sharing.
No, you're totally fine, Meredith. I just wanted to jump back in to let you know you have a few minutes. We do like to wrap up about 5 minutes to 2:30 for the next room, but definitely keep going. If there's any questions, definitely you all can put them in the chat. I just want to do a little time check though, so definitely feel free to share your screen again if you'd like.
Oh, okay. I thought I was 5 minutes over already.
No, actually, yeah. Our workshops are going to start here at 2:30, so we've just been allowing 5 minutes free time for setup. So yeah, definitely you have about a good five or so minutes left. So yeah, everyone,
yeah. So if anyone has,
go ahead.
Oh, thanks. So if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know I went through that last part, especially super fast, just because I wanted to show you guys. I like practice this timing by myself, but of course, like when I'm actually here, it goes by so differently. So yeah, please, again, like you guys have access to the code. So if you are looking at this maybe a little bit later on and you want to clarify anything, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, as I mentioned. But yeah, if you have any questions now, since we do have 5 minutes, please feel free to ask them.
And don't feel rushed. Go ahead and, you know, we'd like to have for everyone to have time to answer questions just in case you don't think of it right off. But definitely great presentation, Meredith. I really enjoyed that. So I'll be back in a few.
Yeah. And another one that I'm working on.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just
Yeah, another one.
Background.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, this is also super powerful too, because like another one that I'm working on, just while we have a few minutes here, is this other Superwomen site where I'm trying to build a database of fantastic women that have really contributed to the technology space, and especially using my platform to highlight the contributions of African American women to the technology space. So another site that I am working on is building this baseball card site for women in technology. So that's something I will definitely share on my Twitter as well as I continue to build it out. And if you guys have recommendations on women you think who should be in this list, I would love to hear them. And so again, this is something that I built in a day, and I'm working on filling out more. And so it's super powerful to build sites that showcase dynamic data sets and enable you to highlight the accomplishments of different people. So if we look at something like if we dig into these baseball cards, we would be able to see different information about these women and what they've done. And so, oops. I was hacking around with it a little bit. So this one's not as production ready, but we'd be able to show hide different elements on the screen. So on the last one with Katherine Johnson, we did not see a retired, or we saw a retired banner, and we did not see this request superhero help. So if we're able to also like show hide different components on the screen based off of this flag that I have set in the database. So it's super powerful to do things like that. We've done SendGrid integrations as well. I don't know. The Wix animation API, if you are digging into the code a little bit, if I switch back over to my code editor and I look at my solutions page, because I didn't even dig into this dynamic page here, we are able to actually see the timeline API in work progress here. So you attach it to a UI element, and then you can add different components to it. We're able to use our dynamic data set to get one item and update the information on the screen. So again, updating that title text, and then creating our list of dynamic elements on the screen and showcasing just that data about that particular selected item. So really powerful to create these dynamic pages where this is only based off of, so my solution is my current context, which you can kind of see here in this, oops, go away, in our drop-down menu, so that you can change it as well. And it will also let you preview what it would look like when you attach a dynamic page to a singular item in your database as well. So there's a lot of really amazing features. I encourage you to dig around at the code that I shared with you, and also reach out on social media if you want to learn more. You can also find me on LinkedIn if you don't have a Twitter or don't like that method. So please feel free to reach out in any way that you like. Yeah.